Hello, everybody, and welcome back to that Milan podcast. Yes, we have smiles. Yes, the weather is nice outside. Yes, finally, Milan had a 90-minute match in which nobody had to stress out the entire time. I think everybody was happily confused by Milan's 4-0 victory over Udinese and Martino Puccio. That's Matt Santangelo over there. You guys probably all know that at this point if you're still tuning into episodes this season. Or maybe you're new coming back thinking Milan maybe have some quote-unquote life towards the end of this season. Again, guys, we appreciate all the support that you guys have been giving us during this very turbulent and difficult season. Again, subscribe and follow the podcast at that Milan Pod everywhere, Apple, Spotify podcasts, to subscribe to this channel. Likely to get a live reaction video this weekend, by the way, with the match against Atalanta, which we'll get into towards the end of the episode. So happy Easter for everybody celebrating. And yeah, let's get into this, Matt. 4-0, a beatdown. You and I didn't see this coming. I stuck with a win because I said that we would beat Udinese, and everyone thought I was crazy for saying that. I am not going to sit here and take credit that I knew this would happen. Your initial reactions. We see a formation change. We'll get into why or how it took so long to do so. But the fact of the matter was this was Milan's best victory of 2025 in terms of complete performances over 90 minutes in any competition. So what is your immediate takeaway from this other than being stunned, I guess?
One word to describe, or the only word I feel like it comes to mind to describe this result, was refreshing to see, or refreshing, because I think that we haven't had many of these types of results. I mean, the scoreline aside, I think obviously 4-0 is a great scoreline. It's one, us scoring goals, two, keeping a clean sheet, which we haven't really been able to do much at all this year. Even in the matches where you had a lopsided victory, we've always still conceded like that one or two goals. And it's like we never played from start to finish a balanced, complete game, both
match.
on the field and in the scoreline, right? And I think this was one of them. And this is against a team that, in our preview episode, I actually picked a draw because I thought that we didn't really show any signs in previous weeks of turning a new leaf, turning a corner, having a end of the season surge of good form and being able to at least maybe threaten for a European spot. But this was great to see, and I think a lot of it kind of stems to the fact that Sergio Conceição, who many players have highlighted, worked on a couple different things in the build-up to this game, specifically with the formation and the setup of the players, which obviously we'll have a deeper dive into in this episode. But seeing the numbers in the defense, in central defense, which is a bit strange because you see three in the back and you're like, Milan don't have enough strong center backs to play three there. Yet they did. And the midfield four, you see two players, one more in Theo Hernandez, who as everyone with pitchforks out because they're ready to see this guy leave. And then the other guy, Jimenez, has had some difficulties in recent weeks. We didn't really know what to expect in this match from a team standpoint. And Milan got a great result. 4-0 is exactly what you wanted, just unfortunate because it's come on, the beginning days of April when, frankly, we needed this weeks ago and months ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just been highlighted with our chase for the top four. Everyone shares down their breakdowns of here are all the teams that are competing for those final European spots that are really just not like, the Napoli or Inters of the world who are fighting for the title. Everyone's like, oh, look, in this hypothetical situation, if Milan win every single match to end the season and these teams slip up, Milan can get back into top four or even theoretically top five, depending upon how some other clubs in Europe do. I just found it very funny that it does arrive with that. They've been in certain matches. And again, what we were talking about in recent weeks, these back-breaking, stupid concessions of goals. And you really didn't get a sense of that in this match from Milan. Udinese had 5 shots on target, 14 total shots. And quite frankly, if you go back and you just remember watching the match, none of the shots, and Maignan did a great job before he got injured, that none of these shots you were like, oh, that was close. Milan almost conceded there. Or that was like a really bad job. You never really felt that Milan were under fire from Udinese, which was a huge surprise because that's basically been the norm all season long. And you got to say, to an extent, you want to give credit to the manager from making a change. But this is what has been so mind-boggling for the longest of times, even going back to last year and when Milan started having their struggles after the Scudetto, was like, okay, we know that this 4-2-3-1 formation only truly works if you have the personnel for it. Milan kept forcing this formation, and sometimes it wasn't always a 4-2-3-1. There was signs of like a 4-4-2, even 4-3-3 to an extent, where Milan looked better and didn't look like they were just a completely amateur team when it came to defending. This completely changed a lot of dynamics when it came to that. And I think what makes me so annoyed by all of this is why it took so long for this to happen. Conceição had mentioned in the presser after the fact was that, they tried this during the international break. They were looking at certain things. And it's just funny to me that they played multiple matches after the international break in which they were slipping up, and there was no sign or attempt to change up that formation. Again, you don't always want to say better late than never, because I kind of don't agree with that, because late is going to cost them. And again, this is a one-off match so far. We have to see how this carries out. Do they stick with this? How do they do against the upcoming opponents like an Atalanta? How do they do against Inter in Coppa Italia? And obviously the remaining matches, Bologna, Roma, are a couple of sides that they have to face off against. With this, you kind of just felt a completely refreshed 11 here, where a lot of guys didn't feel the need to have this huge stress of responsibility off of the ball or taking care of these defensive responsibilities, which are just that, where you have to work hard off of the ball, cover for a lot of players that are pushing up the pitch, like a Theo Hernandez, like a Rafael Leao. You didn't really kind of see much of that, and we'll get into some of the players that are reflected in. But why do you think it took so long for Milan to just make a switch like this? Is it the fact that Europe in Serie A, in terms of a top 4 placement, is gone now, and they're just basically like, you know what? We're playing with quote unquote house money, even though that's not really the case because you're still Milan. But we know sort of the angle is all hope is sort of lost. F it. Let's try this. Let's see if it works. And they put in their best performance. I think it also is met with more frustration in a way, because not only are Milan fans always frustrated like us, I think we're frustrated to the point in like, we knew a certain formation wasn't working. Why didn't you change it up? And the fact that it immediately works against a side that always gives you fits makes it even more frustrating. But did you come away with like, why didn't we do this sooner? Or are you sort of like, it's kind of whatever at this point, because we're not likely going to finish in the top 4, and this was just potentially a one-off performance for the time being?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really, I know there was a lot of, commentary, after this result, and how, how could you not want to speak on this, right? Because it was a really good performance. There was a lot of balance in the way we played. The defense didn't really feel like they were under duress at any point. The midfield had balance, which hasn't been the case for a while. We have talked at length about the fact that the midfield, whether it be Tijani forward in a more attacking role or deeper, due to suspension or limited play from certain individuals, we always felt that, man, the midfield is just getting absolutely overrun. In most of these games, even the games that we barely were able to scrape across to get a win, we always felt like the midfield was still being overrun, and we really weren't kind of establishing order in that department. That wasn't the case here. And I mean, even in the attack, right, where we've been going through 3 strikers the past month, right? It's been Jimenez, it's been Jovic, it's been Tammy across different competitions, and we're getting kind of, mixed results, but more or less it feels as though we're getting more consistent results, in the sense that we kind of have an idea of what we're going to expect from Jovic and Tammy Abraham. I don't know how much that comes down to those players having been here longer than Santiago Jimenez. It's hard to say, but I think when you see this result play out, you see the formation, what builds up into this win. I think I'm kind of of the mindset that I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. We probably could have done this sooner, but I'd like to think that the coaches we've had, Fonseca, when he wasn't getting results, even Sergio Conceição now, that they wouldn't be so stubborn, hard-headed, because I think that the truth of the matter is this. I think that players, coaches that have gotten to this point, that have gotten the jobs they've had based on certain principles and philosophies and core ideas of how they want to play football.
Yeah, I agree.
Sometimes they can be stubborn and think, no, I know this works. I'm staying with my guys and staying with my formation. And I know this
That
player
with
can play
Pioli
here.
quite often.
Right. And I think that in a strange way, whoever the coach is next, I'm assuming it's probably not going to be Sergio, because I think multiple reports are suggesting that, the fact that it took so long for him to make this change and to get that result is a bit more damning, because it's like, why didn't he figure this out months ago? I just hope the next coach isn't as rigid and caught up in their formation and setup, and they can kind of tailor their setup and their idea of playing to their opponent. I think at the root of a good football team, you still have to have, a foundation to build on when it comes to how you want to set up your defense, your midfield, your attackers, so on and so forth. But I think that, I think the mark of a good coach is being able to adjust. Hey, I think this team actually is going to hit us this way, or I think they actually really defend. How do we break down a team that's going to sit in a low block versus a team that will play an open game? They will bring numbers forward. That's where Milan have, at least in my opinion, the past couple seasons, and we've seen it in some of their better results this year, where when the games are open against Inter, against Real Madrid, they thrive in that. We haven't really seen them be able to play a game where it's against a team that, historically speaking, and as far as their identity is concerned, play a more defensive, compact, keep numbers behind the ball like a Udinese typically does. So I don't know. I mean, I think that it was a great result. I can't really take too much from it, truthfully, because, again, I think it's just a shame that it's come this late in the season when we're on the outside looking in of where we want to be.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's kind of the biggest frustration is everyone knows about the individual talent, how they've been in certain matches, the certain teams that they've been beaten or staying in competition with. I mean, how they've been against Inter, how they beat Real Madrid, how they even do well against Bayer Leverkusen. Listen, say what you want about Juventus. They've been battling with Juventus. They were right there and could have won against Napoli if things broke their way. I think that adds to the frustration overall. But you see it from minute one within this match. I mean, Reijnders had an opportunity to score on goal. Milan definitely looked more lively than anything within this match. And let's talk about some of the players that I think benefit from this. And it's so funny to me and how a lot of people know and identify what certain players within this squad thrive in certain systems and positions as opposed to what they've been forced to be playing in. And I'm not saying that these players are perfect and don't have any flaws. Like, listen, all three players listed right here have had inconsistent or poor seasons, especially by their standards. Pavlovic has had a couple good games mixed with a lot of poor games where he's been volatile, not only to himself, but the rest of the team. Theo, we know how subpar he's been. It's basically beating a dead horse at this point. Fofana, regardless of minutes played, has certainly been subpar at times, has somehow managed 5 assists in Serie A, which kind of says a lot about what his qualities best are. And we saw it in this match. Doesn't win duels in this one. He won absolutely 0 of them. But you come away taking from the standpoint of Youssouf Fofana looked the best that he's been all year, in my opinion, within this one, or especially within 2025, which probably also doesn't say much. But at the same time, you're saying to yourself, okay, we all knew he wasn't a double pivot 6 and someone who's more of a regista or a defensive midfielder. We know he's better when he's closer to goal, being a bit more of a box-to-box guy in what was known at Monaco. And again, in what you talk about frustration with forcing players into a certain formation, we see multiple 3 managers in a row now marry themselves to this sort of double pivot where they're playing with a number 10 who's not necessarily a number 10, or these defensive midfielders that are not truly number 6s. And all of a sudden, when you see them put into positions that are more advantageous to who they have to be and where their responsibilities lie, aren't traditionally in that defensive phase. Fofana, not as much defensive responsibility with this 3 at the back. Same goes for Theo Hernandez. You saw Conceição talk about it with Theo. He talks about his offensive qualities. And in the second half in this one, Theo was much better. He was a little shaky to start in the first half. He was making good runs forward, but there was a misplaced pass inside the box to Rafael Leao that gets you a little frustrated. But we see Theo end up scoring. He was threatening. I will say this was one of his better ones. For me, when you see stuff like this happen, you just continue to get frustrated. And we knew when we had Nemanja on profiling Pavlovic at the start of the year, what did he say? He's best in a 3 at the back formation. And it led you to believe that the overall personnel, and something that you highlighted just earlier, is that Milan don't necessarily have 3 at the back personnel over the course of, however 50 matches in a season with all the competitions that they play in. But you see it now and you're sort of like, okay, the midfielders aren't stressing as much. They have more freedom to move up forward, where we saw Fofana did a great job on the assist.
Mm-hmm.
Stealing the ball, passing it off to Leao, who one times it in one of his better finishes in a Milan shirt. Talk about these 3 guys. And you and I had mentioned on Twitter that we thought Theo and Fofana benefited most. Certainly within the defense, there was no one that benefited more than Sriniya Pavlovic when it came to the 3-4-3. But I think these 3 players here, even if it's just 90 minutes, benefited the most from this formation change. And we could see them sitting in with this change moving forward. What did you think about that? Who impressed you the most out of the 3?
Probably Fofana. Because I think that, it's weird for a player that we were so hell-bent on getting. We worked tirelessly to get. We waited weeks and weeks and weeks, and we tried to beat Monaco down for the price. They didn't budge, and eventually we wound up paying the price they wanted from the very beginning, right? So this is a player that I think has had a difficult first year. He's played matches where I think the matches where he's played well, he's been one of our better players in the 11. But the matches where he's been bad, he's been bad. He hasn't. So
when he didn't run back that ball that he lost that one time and Milan conceded, could have been against Bologna. I forget the match.
He's had too many performances where it's like you really don't have an understanding or prediction or forecast or feel of his floor performance. And we talked about that with Pulisic. We talked about that with a couple others, months ago when we were highlighting Pulisic specifically. Was I think at this point you kind of know what you're going to get from him. At the very least, you're going to get the off the ball, you're going to get the pressing, you're going to get the energy, you're going to get the effort. Whether he does some of the other things every single game, that's hard to be, it's unrealistic. But I think at the same time, getting back to Fofana and Pavlovic, these were 2 players that we spent a substantial amount of money, at least for our budget, this past summer. And you look at Pavlovic, we knew kind of what came with getting a young defender that's bounced around as much as he has, despite being very young, right? He feels like he's been in the game for 7-8 years, but he's kind of bounced around from club to club. And you kind of got a sense throughout the course of the season as to why that was the case. And then obviously the conversation that you alluded to with Nemanja, where it kind of all those things are kind of coming to a head and you're like, okay, now I understand why maybe clubs were reluctant and had some pause on Pavlovic. But I think it's going to be interesting because he was on the way out. It felt like in January to Fenerbahce, and a couple other clubs were potentially interested. Then he was retained, and then he had a couple good matches, and then he's had some bad matches. So I think for him and even Fofana, because Theo, I think we've talked about in great detail in recent episodes, right? For his downfall, contract stuff, all that. I think right now I'm kind of in a position for the rest of the season, and my feeling and overall just kind of vibe around a lot of the players like Fofana, Pavlovic, and some of the others is I'm kind of having a bit more of an open mind with how I judge them, because I think it's easy for us to have been in this season, say, Pavlovic stinks, get him out of here. He didn't play well in his first year. He's gone. You got to get rid of him while you can and when you can get something back. Fofana, same thing. X, Y, and Z player in the team. We got to move on. And I think to an extent that Milan probably does need to overhaul this team quite a bit, because you're going to get a new sporting director, possibly a new coach. And when you finish 8th, 9th, 7th in the table with differences
wherever they'll be,
something has to change at a drastic wholesale level, in my opinion. Maybe not every single star, but things have to change. So I think with Fofana and Pavlovic, I am willing to have that open mind and say, you know what, maybe second season, more stability with a coach, hopefully, where these guys come in with a new coach, new mindset in the summer, substantial amount of time to kind of work with them, maybe a formation change, maybe philosophy change, visions, ideas change. And now all of a sudden that that faith that we had in young players at the very beginning of the project that we had built in 2019, 2018, that led us to the Scudetto. I think Milan, because of now some restrictions when it comes to lost revenue in the Champions League next year, and
Yeah, we'll
so on
see.
and so forth, they're going to have to be. They can't go every year and say this guy didn't work year one, he's gone. And get rid of 8 guys and bring in another 8 guys is what I'm saying. So
It contradicts their philosophy.
Performances like this, and hopefully they can kind of carry out through the rest of the season, because I know people will say, what difference does it make? We're not getting Champions League. But I think these next batches of games, they're trial runs for Pavlovic.
And these matches matter for the
matter.
teams that they're facing.
Matter,
So, like how people are sort of always like, oh, this is low leverage. They do the same thing in baseball, right? Oh, it's September baseball. This stuff doesn't matter. These games don't mean anything. It's like, well, you're facing teams who are vying for playoff spots. And if they're vying for playoff spots, they're clearly not dogging it. Milan are going to go up against some sides that are potentially going to get into Europe, which would be massive for them, right? Like Roma, Bologna. To your point, okay, maybe Milan not in position to end up winning that. And I totally understand where some people are coming from. Like, hey, when you're here with low leverage and no expectations or pressure at Milan at this point, even though there's always pressure to an extent with them, they aren't really got anything on the line because they screwed up so much this season that they're not in a spot to do that. I will say they're not completely mathematically out of it. I still think there's a certain possibility they could finish 5th or 6th. That's just the reality of where Serie A is at this point. And if there's anything real to take away from this game, I think that could be the case. Again, it's just one match. We can't go away from too much here. There is this part of me that believes that if you have this individual quality, that you're going to be able to really do something with it. And we'll see. I'm not going off of anything right now. I really respect and get where you're coming from with that point of like Fofana, Pavlovic have been in here for a turbulent season. They've been poor. What does the new sporting director think? I don't think he can take away too much. It really seems like Theo Hernandez also himself, to talk about him just real quick within this, doesn't want to leave. And you're kind of basically faced and tasked with a decision that you have to renew him or not. At this point, you just renew him. If he's refusing to leave, you just figure out a figure. I'm not saying you keep him for the long term, because I think basically how he's been the past 2 seasons has been inexcusable. I'm not always going to say like, oh yeah, a great performance by him, he definitely deserves to stay here no matter what. I'm honestly just waiting to see who they hire as a director, go off of that, and then you go from there. I'm not trusting anyone within this situation. We've gotten comments in our YouTube comment sections here and many other places with people conflating us, thinking that we have to wait and see what happens in defending management. We do not, for the 50th billionth time, for people who do not want to listen, we do not trust management. We do not trust ownership. We do not trust the direction in which this club is going in. However, what we are saying is we're not going to completely shut the door in this club, turning it around, because we want to see them thrive. We want to see them do well. And anytime Milan win, I think it's a positive, and we want to see more of that. We are just also not happy in terms of how they're running things. And I think those are not mutually exclusive. And if you're able to separate the two, then you're going to have a much easier time being a fan. To finish off what happened within this match, Maignan's injury, this was definitely the scariest and biggest negative of this match. He's going to have to rest at least a week, so that has been disclosed already. So not going to be there for the match against Atalanta. He's dealing with some head trauma, aka a concussion, most likely. We don't know 100% all the facts with him. A week also leads you to believe he'll be missing the second leg of the Coppa Italia against Inter. So Sportiello looks like he'll be hopping in. Milan have a legitimate backup now. That's been respectable within his career. So we're going to see how that pays off. Every single time you think of reserve goalkeeper against Inter and Coppa Italia, your mind always wanders to Antonio Donnarumma and that performance of his years ago. Stop. But yes, he did. He did. Right. Hey, listen. That guy, I have never seen a goalkeeper. I always forget the one in the mid to late 2000s that was also dreadful. A goalkeeper that made you feel so unconfident that anytime a ball was shot on goal, you thought it wasn't going in. But hey, Tatarusano, that draw against Inter the year they won the Scudetto, saving, was it Lautaro's penalty? Someone's penalty. Listen, hey, step it up. These backup goalkeepers always have this juju going on with Inter. listen, Inter are vying for a treble. We'll see what happens there. Really unfortunate. Maignan, you could definitely, within the past couple weeks, annoying at times on how he concedes certain goals, but he was Milan's best player these past few match days. I mean, shall we even speak on what this loss is for Milan at this point? Because he was playing great football and great shot stopping as of late. So just a quick highlight on his injury before we move on.
Yeah, the play was coming along quite well of late. Obviously, a couple goals here and there, but more or less, like he felt like he was kind of getting back into vintage Mike Maignan at Milan. And, the game against Fiorentina was a clear sign of that. I mean, the goals we gave up weren't on him, in my opinion. I know some people said, well, in your post, he could have done this, he could have done that. But like the fact that he was able to give us points in certain matches, I think is a testament to the form he was in at the time of him getting injured. And more so the fact that we're losing a player that is our captain. We do need a leader in these moments. And, a leader is important going into a match against an Atalanta, for instance, or against an Inter in a crucial second leg of the Coppa Italia, right? So you want your leaders there, right? This is where you rely and lean on your leaders to galvanize a group in an important game. And, obviously the fact that we don't have him is disappointing, but more importantly and most importantly, the fact that he is healthy. When he went down, I saw that collision. I was watching. I had to watch the game back afterwards, but I saw that collision in real time.
Brutal.
And every Milan fan, every football fan, you hold your breath when guys go down like that because you just never know.
Yeah.
So the fact that both players are fine, Mike Maignan will take some time for himself, of course, to recover. But I'm a firm believer, and I've always been a big advocate for it's next man up mentality. This is a crucial moment for Sportiello. Obviously, he has the opportunity to step into these next two games, possibly more, depending on what the status of Mike is, and give Milan something. So, like I said before with some of the other players, Sportiello can, I don't know what his future holds, but if he plays well for Milan in these games, they might say, hey, we actually have our backup keeper here. Like, we want to keep this guy. So,
with Torriani's situation, not to say or to get too crazy about it, but ultimately with players like this, when your opportunities are limited at a big club like Milan, it's going to define your stay at the club. For Sportiello, this is going to be everything.
You don't play much. You're not going to play much anyway.
Exactly.
So
and everything that will be remembered about him will be what happens in leg. If there's an impact one way or another, they could get smashed and has nothing to do with him. But, ultimately it will define his tenure at Milan. So we'll see what Sportiello ends up doing. Speaking of him, one of his former clubs, Milan, played this weekend against Atalanta. They had a huge victory against Bologna this past weekend for their top 4 chances. They blew their opportunities, I guess most would say, for their chance to win the title. They're clearly the team outside of, I guess you could say, the Lazios of the world within the past, 8 years or so that kind of had an outside opportunity that could make a run, could shock the world, all of Europe, all of Italy, to finally win a league title. They slipped up once again, more of the same. Gasparini seems to be on his way out. There's a strong possibility of that. We'll see what happens with them. It could be their last hurrah with this sort of regime that they have. Tony D'Amico linked to leave as well. For us, Milan played Atalanta well in Bergamo last time. They unfortunately lost because no one was watching one of the better players in the league, and Ademola Lookman at the far post there. Matteo Retegui is a sensational player. Scamacca has obviously been injured most of the year. We know what Atalanta are. Milan played them relatively well, as opposed to some of, the instances in which they get embarrassed. I think Milan get a result, all things considered. I know a lot of them have not been playing too well. We know that they have the short turnaround to Coppa Italia. I understand that it is you could argue a bigger fixture for Atalanta, where they are heading into Champions League next season, as opposed to Milan, where Milan sit within the table. They're still 9th. And for me, I think this is, again, one of those matches about pride, that you step up, and we've seen Milan play relatively well against a bigger side. They're still prone to these silly mistakes. We'll see if they continue with the 3-4-3. I would have to imagine after what they saw against Udinese that they're going to be sticking with that sort of formation. Yeah, if Milan get a result against Atalanta at home, once again, I think it's one of those things where if Milan were in a great position within the table, you'd take it. But now where Milan are and where they hope to be, you think a win is big for them. It's pretty clear that Atalanta are the better side, and I don't put it past Milan to get a result with the way they've been. I'm likely going to go with a draw here, but we'll see. It's just so hard to go off of that one performance, right? With the new formation. For me, I think Atalanta are the better side. They've been more consistent. They have a lot more on the line here. I do just see Milan getting a draw with this. What are your kind of reactions and anticipation for this match?
So part of me wants to be optimistic and say, hey, we figured something out, right? It's taken us until April to maybe find what our true formation should be. But I think that we haven't shown we're worthy of that trust as far as being able to compound good performances and play a good stretch of football matches. Part of me thinks that Milan's looking at the table. Again, this is just purely speculative, just kind of something that's popped in my head. I mean, obviously they're professional footballers. The coach is going to try to get them ready to go out there and win every single match day. We know that. But part of me is thinking, all right, you don't have Maignan. Okay, even when you have played a good performance, you haven't been really able to show consistency off the back of that. Does Milan turn a lot of their attention? Is a lot of the focus, energy, and resources put into that second leg against Inter? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the big question, right? Like, how do they view that?
Because I think that they might be looking at that and thinking, okay, well, we're still in that tie.
Yeah.
That's our most realistic pathway into a European spot for the Europa League. So
exactly.
Do they kind of like feel like they're like, we want to win. Maybe we'll play a little bit more conservative, try to keep the game in front of us. And truthfully, at this point, again, a draw doesn't do us anything. We need like wins out.
Yeah. They have to win out. They have to win out.
So I'm actually going to go. I'm like 1-1 draw, 2-1 loss because.
Okay. Pick one.
I'm going to go 2-1 loss. I'm going to go 2-1 loss. I think we're going to play a pretty good game, but man, like I just it's hard for me to like just kind of lean into a victory and lean into the fact that we're 30 match days in. Like, okay, yeah, we figured it out now. We're going to play good football the rest of the way. Like I need validation. Like show me something in this game. If they come out there and they play well against Atalanta, defensively, like a lot of the things we saw against Udinese carry over and like we were able to repeat those things. And like, okay, like
structure.
Fair point. But like in the matches we've looked good, the next game it's like
there's been zero consistency.
So
zero consistency. I think you're right. I'm gonna go 2-2 draw. You got 2-1 loss. So same as the other fixture. So we'll see what happens there. Again, big one on Easter. So the big-ish news, I guess, but just to bring it up and address it. Reijnders having strong links. Again, the sources here are not great. So take it with a grain of salt, but you can't put anything past a really big club with a lot of finances like Manchester City being linked to signing a really good player in Tijani Reijnders, who's been Milan's top scorer this season, scored the most goals out of any midfielder in all of Europe this year. He's got 14. Listen, he fits in what City are trying to do. They're trying to move on from certain players. There's definitely going to be this sort of revolution at the club this season. They spent a stupid amount of money. We don't know what's going to happen with their 115 charges. I wouldn't put it past Milan for accepting an offer of 65 to 70 million. I find it embarrassing because once again, regardless of what I think of this management, which I don't think highly of them, I find it to be a great disservice to not keep players. Regardless, I don't care if there's no Champions League next year for Milan. It is a disservice to the club to sell off players who are very good and can help you moving forward to help win trophies. I don't think this does Milan any good. You're restarting a lot of things, especially if guys like Leao, Theo, Maignan are staying. Keep that foundation. Add to that foundation that Christian Pulisic is obviously still a part of. Like, you have to do that. I think it would be embarrassing if Milan sell him off to City. Again, I understand if it's hard to turn down certain figures sometimes for other players. He's not the youngest of guys. For me, if Reijnders wants to stay, you keep him. It's fairly simple. If the offer is too good and he's willing to leave, I understand it from a certain standpoint. However, again, it's increasingly difficult to defend management. And I don't think anyone defends management anymore. They really have very few supporters, if that. So I think this would just be another example of people having zero trust in the project, in the ownership, in the management, and the direction of the club moving forward. I don't care what the price would be here from City. It would have to. The only thing I'd be comfortable with, in which they said and they got an offer for, is like if they came in with 80 million. And I'm not saying that's a realistic opportunity or that's what Milan should be holding out for. Listen, I'm sorry. I understand Reijnders has flaws. I'm not selling the guy. Has to be stupid money, in my opinion. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that, it's weird because the last big time player we sold for a big fee was Sandro Tonali. And when you see a player, but regardless of all the betting thing and everything that kind of circled around Tonali, after and still does, I think when you look at just kind of the deal in a nutshell, standalone, that was the one player that you look at and think, this guy is Cuoro Rossonero. That this is a guy that should stay. Like we're not getting rid of him. In many ways, like what Inter did, where they resisted offers and that temptation to sell for big money Nicolo Barella that same summer, despite their financial issues. So Milan are in a good financial position, yet they still showed us that they're willing to sell a player for any price.
Yeah.
That means Rafael Leao. I know they've been very firm on that 175 million release clause. Very unlikely someone triggers that. It's going to have to be a fee below that if he does move. And then you look at this Tijani Reijnders situation where he just renewed. He got a big increase in his wages, but it's not by any means something that Manchester City couldn't afford. They could probably double that easily. I think he's on, 3+ million a year?
Yeah.
Right? They can easily say, we'll give you 6 or 7. Easy.
You can double and triple.
That's a non-conversation. Yeah. It's going to be more down to the fee. And Milan, now, unlike in that Sandro Tonali situation, where they were steadily competing in the Champions League as far as year in and year out, financial situation was very good. The balance sheets were very good. And yet they still sold Sandro Tonali to fund a revolution that, frankly, aside from one or two guys, has not panned out.
No, it's been awful.
So PTSD kicks in when people see Reijnders to City 70, 80 million. Okay, fine. The great money's great, but how you spend it and the fact that you can't spend it wisely to rebuild a team should make this a simple no. We're not selling this guy. But we don't know what the director looks like. We don't know what Furlani's going to do. We don't know what Jerry's going to do. And the fact that we're not making Champions League, do they say, well, we have to kind of make up for it somehow? Is Tijani the last hit? Because he is right now, aside from Rafael Leao, as far as players realistically being linked to moves and possibly candidates to move away for big money, it's him and Rafa. Pulisic, I think, is staying. I think he's staying.
I actually think at this rate, the way it's going, the most likely guy to leave is actually Maignan. I think a lot of these guys are going to stay. And I get where you're coming from. I'm not ruling any of this out. Everything that you said is plausible. And I think you could back that up. It's also very difficult, as you mentioned, without a director to know this. I will just say again, I'd like to remind a lot of people, there's other guys that they can end up selling and money that they're getting coming in from sales on top of being financially stable that they don't have to do this. All I'm saying is Milan don't have to do this at all. Seriously, like fiscally, they sad. I know they can't afford to miss Champions League because standards of the club are so high. But the amount of money that they're getting to come in from player sales like CDK, what they'll get for Salamakers, what they're going to get for Pierre Kalulu, what they're going to get for Benacer, what they could get for Fikayo Tomori, who's likely on his way out, not renewing a Kyle Walker, getting selling an Emerson Royale, selling a Loftus-Cheek, selling a Chukwueze. All these guys can go, and they have some relative value that when you add up all the dollars at the end of the day, give you a relatively sizable budget to plug in the holes where, in my opinion, you can go and get a Samuel Ricci, right? again, these are just hypotheticals where you can get in guys that are costing 20-30 million euro worth of players that are a little bit more guaranteed. If you have the right director in there that knows the eye for talent, they could just get them in and just be like, go with that, run with that, build off of the foundation. You keep Maignan, you can keep Leao, you can keep Reijnders, you can keep Fofana, a better version of Fofana. You obviously have Pulisic there, you have Leao. Pulisic and Leao are
Santiago Jimenez, hopefully your strikers sorted.
Santiago Jimenez to build off of that. If you keep Abraham, that's fine. If they kept this core 3 strikers plus Camarda, or if Camarda gets loaned out for next season, I'm not necessarily completely against it. To me, I don't think you have to rip off everything. I think there's guys that have been isolated out of the squad that you could recoup funds for and add to that. Like for me, I will sell Chow, Tomori, Loftus-Cheek, Emerson Royale, add up all those funds before I sell even a Theo. After everything I've said about the guy, I'd rather sell those 4 because what do they add to my team? Next to nothing at this point. And we've been in that position that I'm okay with it. And you can guess what? Tomori, 20-something million there. Chow, 20-something million plus. You're suddenly looking at almost 50 million for 2 players that had been liabilities for you this season. And again, I'm not also opposed to, keeping those guys. I just think there's flexibility within the squad itself that you don't have to sell the best players to fund your market. That's all I'm saying. But everything you just said could also be true because that's where ownership and management lay. Jovic, I mean, real quick to wrap this up here, this is the fickle nature of what this management is. You and I had both spoken on this. I have nothing personal against Jovic. What he's done, we've given him praise the past couple episodes for being prepared as a professional to go out there, sitting on the bench, basically isolated from the squad and being able to contribute despite that. However, not being in the squad and not contributing for quite some time, being the number 9 at this club and basically having your future decided off of 2 performances, it's exactly why no one really wants to trust this management. Your thoughts on them still thinking about Jovic staying? This is, excuse me for the burp there. This is one of the times in which you look at management again that reminds you of last summer, man, where, Stefano Pioli, he's largely looking poor and he's likely to leave. But guess what, bud? You could salvage your stay here at AC Milan if you win Europa League. Look at Jovic. You could stay at AC Milan and still have the number 9 shirt if you keep this up for 5 more matches. Forget everything else that happened for months on end from August to March. You could turn it around by getting us into 7th place in a Coppa Italia final. How do you think? And it's like, really, guys? That's how we're making decisions? And again, this could all be bullshit because of how everything goes with the newspapers in Italy and how reporting is. Because like we say every single time, they don't have a sporting director. How do we know? What is the sporting director's capabilities? Is it really Furlani running things and Furlani just wants a yes man to fall in line like Di Ottavio was? Or is it somebody who gets to actually independently think, make decisions on his own and actually get to do his fucking job? Wow, what a concept, right? So with this Jovic situation, you and I are 100% on the same page like this. This just seems like a fickle decision based off of a couple good performances.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a bit of an odd situation because last year when he did play, he in many ways was similar in his production in the way he contributed to the team that Noah Okafor was, right? That was another player you mentioned.
Another player we could sell, yes.
Right, another player we could sell. A lot of the impact that Jovic provided was off the bench, in cup games, games in the league. And everyone's like, okay, like for the money, he's not bad to have on the team. You can play him against the minnows of Serie A in some of these early cup matches, and he'll do a serviceable job for you. He'll give you a 6 out of 10. Maybe he'll get you a goal performance, right? Yeah. And the money wasn't expensive, outrageous, but we only went and committed to him by giving him a number 9 shirt, a contract renewal. Granted, we've given out much worse financially and to much worse players over the years. And granted, he was injured for certain parts of the season. So it's kind of been a bit of a challenge for him overall. And to your point, there's nothing personal towards the player. I just think that we're having these kind of internal conversations week in and week out. And again, whether they're true or not is another conversation that remains to be seen. But I don't think that we can take too much away from this because we don't know who the coach is going to be. We don't know who the sporting director is going to be. We don't know what other players they're going to want to bring in. We don't know how much money our budget's going to be. We don't know which players are going to come, which players are going to go. Is it going to be a massive revolution with this team, or is it going to be scaled down and we're going to get 3 to 4 guys? Because we did bring in some players in January. Bondo is on a permanent deal. So Teal's on a loan with option. Maybe there's something we work out with Fiorentina for Yassine Adli. So I think, or Camuso, that's been another.
I don't know. He seems destined for Juve, but
right.
You're right. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is I think that ultimately, guys, you like ourselves, we can't look too much into a lot of these reports because I feel as though every single report that's been circling around Milan, the future of certain players, or the future of the coach, whatever, is always capped and ended with, but Milan don't know who the director is going to be, so we'll have to wait and see. That's their cop-out. They can throw anything at the wall and say, Chelsea want Rafael Leao, Barca want Rafael Leao for $100 million, but new director has to wait and see. So it's that's what they're running with now. So don't look too much into this, guys, but I think truthfully, I don't think that we should be dictating the future of certain players based on how they produce in a one-off game. And I think that ultimately there really aren't many details that we can speak on with this because truthfully, we don't know, what the figures would be as far as a renewal. We don't know. We don't even know what Camarda's role could be. We don't know Tammy Abraham. He's played well, but he's got high wages. Do Roma cut us a deal? Do Salamakers come? We don't know. There's so many uncertainties.
There's a lot. Yeah. It's just very funny. But again, it's just always stuff that we like to talk about. It's interesting subject matter at the end of the day. So we really appreciate every single one of you that tune in every single week. Again, subscribe to our other channel, That Milan Pod over there. We're doing great on TikTok recently as well, at That Milan Pod in every single place. Apple, Spotify, rate us 5 stars, give us a good review, leave us some comments over there, leave us some comments on what do you think the transfer market might be like. Give us a comment on who you think the sporting director is going to be. What do you think the score of this weekend's match against Atalanta will be as well. Again, you guys can go and follow Matt everywhere at Matt_Santangelo, at AC Milan Bros, the other Twitter account that he runs with his brother. Again, for me, you can go and follow everything on Instagram at Martino_Puccio and then at Martino Puccio. Everywhere else, basically, TikTok, YouTube, obviously here on the channel, and then my Twitter account as well. We appreciate every single one of you. You guys have been great supporting us all season long. Just a few more matches, everybody, and then you could relax just a little bit before an incredibly stressful and misleading summer where there's going to be a bunch of bullshit in the newspapers. But again, any other final comments, Matt, before we wrap up?
No, just thanks to the community as always for supporting, liking, subscribing, commenting on the videos. We read all the comments. I know I do. When the videos go up, I usually kind of pop in periodically, and I don't comment. I know Martino is very involved in the comments and kind of clearing things up or maybe engaging with you guys. But I do read the comments, especially the bad ones too. We want to hear feedback. If you guys want us to talk about certain things, you guys disagree, that's totally cool. We're here to have that
respectful disagreements.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what we're here for. This is why Martino and I do what we do. We're not here to be yes men. We don't expect you guys to be yes men and agree with everything that we put out here, but be respectful, be willing to have that conversations where you see other people's perspectives. So we do appreciate you guys, and let's hope for a couple good results our way.
Yeah, and also just to wrap up the quote-unquote cringe part of the show where we give shout-outs to other good creators over here. So just real quick, shout-out to Old Heart Rossonero. He had a great video on Paolo Scaroni recently. Our boy Kush is back, so give a shout-out to Kush. Go and show him all that support and love. Milan Coast to Coast as well, Milan Weekly Podcast, MLM Podcast with Max and Gino. Guys are always doing great work. Me, Marco, Milan Fan TV, just so many good stand-up people that we love to support here and always talk about Milan with. Again, stay tuned. Thank you guys for the support and see you next time.